What's up, guys? Josh Shaw here at TheCardGuyz, and today we're going to be talking about the impact of the brand new Kasai specialization card, Blood Follows Blade. So this is a zero-cost yellow pitch Kasai specialization that's a warrior attack reaction. It blocks for 3, and it says target sword attack gains go again. And when this hits, create a Centauri Sellsword token. And to refresh your memory, a Centauri Sellsword token is a warrior token mercenary ally, attacks for 3 and has 2 health, and has a once per turn action for a resource you can attack, and it has go again. The Centauri Sellsword can only attack, though, if you've attacked with a weapon. So the general play pattern is you attack with your weapon, then you attack with your Centauri Sellsword, and then you follow up with your weapon. Now, this card is an extremely impactful card, and I'm going to break it down for you guys. So let's start off with kind of the base of the card. So the base of the card, the stat line is just near perfect. It's a yellow pitch, which is actually very relevant because you need a lot of yellows to activate Kasai's hero ability. Often you're built pretty close to like 20-20-20 on the reds, yellows, and blues. Maybe even a little bit less on the blues, a little bit more on the reds. But generally, you're running a good amount of yellows, probably 15 to 20 yellows in most configurations. And this being a yellow, even though it's not a blue, you might say is better, but being yellow is very, very relevant for Kasai. It blocks for 3. We love cards that block for 3. We don't like instances in Warrior generally. We don't like 2 blocks. We don't like no blocks. So, like some of the Brutes cards have 3 blocks are good. We'll take them. Also, this card costs 0, which is extremely important because we can use the other resources for gold. We can use it for playing things like Spoils of War. We can use it to attack with our Centauri Sellswords. We can put it into Braveforge Bracers. We can put it into Grains of Bloodspill. Kasai has a lot of use for extra resources, and this costing 0 is really, really good. Also, this card is not legendary. Often, powerful warrior cards are legendary cards, like Spirit of Arenas, kind of the first one that comes to mind. You can run a full playset of this in your Kasai deck. Also, this card just says on hit. It doesn't say on hit on a Tuesday with the weapon with the hilt when it deals damage to somebody wearing a red shirt. You know, no qualifiers, just says on hit, so we can attack allies and get the on hit from this. So that's quite nice. Now, one thing that is very, very underrated is that this is a reaction. Now, first of all, reactions are good for many reasons. Obviously, we can hide information. It plays around mechanics like overpower, but attaching an on hit to a reaction on a vanilla attack or vanilla looking attack is extremely strong. So the first thing that comes to mind often is things like pummel. But there are many, many effects in the game. So I've listed off a bunch of these here. Now, some of these are coming in on a class with kind of upfront on hits like an assassin, but there are several examples here of things that, you know, they look normal and then they just suddenly become much greater than what they appeared to be. So basically having a on hit at reaction speed historically has been very, very good. And Warrior, even though a lot of classes tend to play reactions against defense reactions against us, being able to extract extra value from your opponent not blocking is something that's extremely important as Warrior, and it's something that design-wise hasn't really been talked about much or really been printed as much. So this is a good, good design road going forward. So, okay, so now that we have the baseline, this thing's real good. All right, let's talk a little bit more about like the effectiveness of this card. So this card helps with and aligns with Kasai's game plan. Now, her game plan is generally to, whether or not you're the mid-range style or the draw side version of Kasai, you are a heavy weapon-based hero that relies on extracting value from your opponent's blocking your Centauri Swords, things like Valiant Dynamos, and then several power cards. Spoils of War generates copper for blood on our hands, and cards like Raisin Army help you close out games against more defensive decks. And you're basically trying to extend the game a little bit and threaten enough gold and copper generation, and then have an outlet for those things, either through just cracking them as, gold is the payoff, or actually like literally using them for some of the card effects. And this is a card, so in order to enact that game plan, you need a pretty high density of go again, because if you do not have go again, your turns suck, basically. A lot of cards, for example, Slice and Dice, it's +1 to the first attack, +3 to the second attack. If there's no second attack, you're missing out on a lot of value. Not to mention Dynamos, obviously you need to extract value from that. Also, your hero ability applies for the whole turn, so being able to, swing twice means you're more likely to connect, which means you're more likely to generate gold. This card also can act as a turn extender, so you can use this on the second sword and then come in with the Cell Sword, or come in with like a Nourishing Emptiness or something like that. The card being flexible, you can like put it on the first attack, you can put it on the second attack. You could arsenal it as well if your opponent doesn't, like let's say you want to play it on the second one, but your opponent blocks the second attack. That's fine. We'll just arsenal it, have it for next turn. This is also a card, having reaction speed go again is very important for Warrior, because Glint the Quicksilver exists, and now your opponent has to play a little bit of a guessing game. Is it Glint the Quicksilver? Is it Run Through? Is it Shift the Tide of Battle? Is it Blood Follows Blade? Is it, Blade Runner? So now basically having an extra thing that they have to think about should, in theory, mean your Glint the Quicksilvers draw you more cards, and your opponent has to spend a little bit more time blocking, which is, in general, pretty good for us. This card also helps us preserve some gold, because in the longer matchups where we normally play Raise an Army, this can just kind of generate a couple Cell Swords here and there, which means we don't have to go for those, large 3 or 4, which is a little bit rare. Generally, you're playing it for 2, but sometimes you need to play it for X equals 3. Basically, being able to dump gold into gold instead of Raise an Army allows extra play lines to be unlocked, and it just helps with what you're trying to do as Kasai. It discounts your swords, everything. So preserving gold indirectly by playing this card is going to be really important. This card also increases the threat density of the whole deck. In general, dual wield warriors are pretty resilient to fatigue, but this does just give some extra damage, and has nice synergy with other cards in the deck. And because this card exists, it also incentivizes your opponent to block some more, which is something that Kasai really likes. In general, a dual wield warrior loves when they can engage with the opponent, when the opponent blocks them, and then they get to extract value from dynamos on turns where it's more predictable on how they're going to attack. And basically, I've joked around several times that Warrior has a hidden ability. It's basically get them to block enough and get value from them blocking you. Basically, the more times they block the Centauri Cell Swords or Centauri Swords with attack actions, it's going to be good for her. This card, in summary, could be thought of as basically a majestic Blade Runner. The math is a little bit fuzzy, but basically if you can predict that your opponent is not going to block an attack, you can basically get that 3 value for 1 resource from the Cell Sword or from the Blade Runner effect, because you would get 3 damage for 1 resource. You basically get that, plus you get a dude on the board. Now, a dude on the board represents at least 2 life, sometimes more, depending on the matchup. And it's a turn extender if they don't clear it. So it's a good card. All right, now let's talk a little bit more about the Centauri Cell Swords, because that is obviously very important. Now, the go again, all the base stat lines, very important, but let's talk a little bit more about the Centauri Cell Swords. So previously, this token was only available by playing Raise an Army, and that came at a pretty significant cost because you would have to sacrifice several gold to generate several dudes. And because of that, Raise an Army wasn't played in every single matchup. This is a very, very matchup dependent card. Oftentimes, you just didn't have enough time, or your opponent had access to very, very impactful on hits. Like you didn't like Mask of Momentum, you didn't want to put guys on the board. So you often weren't playing towards Raise an Army. And then the matchups where you were going towards Raise an Army, you and your opponent both know that, and they were blocking very heavily. Every single time you activated your Kasai hero ability, they were blocking. So it was very difficult to generate the gold needed to play a Raise an Army to close out the game. A very, very good example of that is a hero like Florian with a lot of defense reactions. You weren't really getting many gold tokens throughout the game, and without a sufficient amount of Centauri Sellswords, that matchup was actually very difficult. Now, because of Blood Follows Blade, we now have access to kind of incidental token generation, which is extremely impactful in those type of matchups. But this is also very, very helpful in the faster matchups as well, which is traditionally where Kasai has struggled a little bit. Being able to convert your extra vigor tokens, so normally an extra vigor token, if you have two, that's really good because then you can activate the gold. But if you have just one, sometimes it allows for your turn to be a little bit more smooth. But sometimes you just burn it into Braveforge Bracers or Grains again and call it a day. This allows for a little bit of outlet towards extra resources. Also, it allows you to use your gold for the gold, which will draw you into more gas and allow you to, keep up with the very, very aggressive decks. Also, creating a little bit of extra value and damage over a 6 to 8 turn game can be the difference between winning and losing. Basically, creating a little bit more pressure on them with 1 or 2 Centauri Sellswords, which is traditionally not brought. We traditionally don't see Centauri Sellswords in aggressive matchups. This can be very, very impactful. We know, I've said it many times, often as Warrior, you win by 1 or 2 life. And this is one of the very few cards that can extract a lot of value in a lot of different situations because the Centauri Sellswords are very, very flexible by themselves. However, previously, Raise an Army was not a flexible card, whereas Blood Follows Blade is a very flexible card. Mathematically, Centauri Sellswords are quite difficult to pin down the exact value, but in general, you will be able to convert it into 3 offense and then at least 2 defense, potentially more, depending on how much damage they have to send into it. And it also creates, like I talked about in the previous slide, it creates a longer game, which is generally good for Kasai. There are some matchups, like I mentioned, Mask of Momentum and stuff like that, where potentially putting dudes on the board could create a situation where they get certain on hits. But in those type of matchups, you can either block with the card, pitch it, or navigate it in such a way where you can minimize those downsides. TLDR, this is a powerful, flexible, and impactful card that's going to be played in most Kasai decks going forward. This is a card that is going to be played in general instead of blocking with this in most matchups. And it's a card that helps our executor game plan and slots very nicely into the deck. There are a few cards that this could potentially replace, like Shift the Tide of Battle, Hit and Run, Blade Runner, stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure most Kasai players are going to be very, very happy with this card. I know that this card is definitely going to shore up some of the other matchups that I think she struggled a little bit with some of the faster matchups. Now this just creates a little bit faster deck speed for her, which is something that she was kind of missing. She was kind of like a more mid... the draw side versions are pretty fast, but they still need the game to go a few extra turns than what they kind of prefer. So this, just adding a little bit more oomph to the deck, I think is going to be very, very nice. Good job, LSS. This is a strong, thematic, powerful, well-designed card, and I'm sure I'm going to be picking up a playset, despite what the Purple Discord thinks. I do play Kasai, and I do love Kasai. So, yeah. All right. Well, this has been Josh Lau with the Card Guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below about this card, and let's hope that I get to make several more Impact of videos this spoiler season. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey man, did you get the KO deck in Worlds? No one's doing that, okay? Like,
Courage to play the whole horse now. Don't scale if you're getting greedy. You're getting 2 cards. Put him in the middle for now. That's perfect. All right, next year.
RTN champion.
Yeah, we're gonna have to order a couple more.
Thanks for watching the video.
Here's some more Card Guys videos you might enjoy.